Pleasure to be here.
Happy to have you on. Maybe if you could take the first minute or two to introduce yourself and tell the audience about what you're up to in the space.
So, I'm an accountant, and I'm with Zeifmans. Zeifmans is a mid-sized accounting firm in Toronto, networked across the country and around the world, but an independent firm nonetheless. And these days, I spend most of my time on the audit side, as well as some consulting. And on the audit side, I'm spending more and more time in the cannabis and the psychedelic space. Cannabis for the last few years, and psychedelics for the last year or so. What's really interesting about my involvement in the psychedelics side is that I've been hearing about the space for a few years because my son is a PhD candidate and researcher, and he's been involved at pretty high levels on research on psilocybin, ayahuasca, etc. And he's been talking to me about it. And then it started to open up from a corporate finance and accounting standpoint, and straight out of Seinfeld, my worlds are colliding. So I'm finding it
Nice.
pretty interesting.
Where does your son research?
So he's at Ryerson, but he's done research elsewhere in the space. He was at Imperial College London last summer, and he would have been back there this summer if not for COVID.
Yeah, very well-respected institute in the space.
Right. Yeah, probably one of the best, if not the best.
Yeah, for sure. And so is that what brought you into the psychedelic space? Like if it wasn't for your son doing that research, would you have found yourself here anyways? Or
I sort of ended up in it because a couple of clients were starting to migrate into the space, cannabis 2.0 sort of thing. And clients who had been in and had done some work in the cannabis space and were migrating to psychedelics, but understanding the space, quite a bit because of my son gave me a leg up to be able to help those clients understand what they're talking about. And I have some background,
fundamental understanding, right?
Right. And I have some background in the pharma space too. I've done some work in pharma over the years. Psychedelics are so much more of a pharma play than cannabis, if I'm allowed to say that,
I think it's encouraged that you do, because it's an important distinction, right? Like these.
I think so. I think so.
And it's just, if you look at the science, right? Like phase 2, phase 3, incoming and fast.
Right. And, real opportunities for, the science indicates for breakthroughs in treatment of mental illness, which, as much as people believe that there are those opportunities in cannabis, it's not proven to quite the same extent as the science seems to be getting to on psychedelics. Well, so I'm not a scientist. I'm not a scientist.
I was just gonna say, neither am I.
Yeah, I don't understand any of that stuff really, but I have some understanding of it, and I really take a accounting and business approach to this stuff, and leave it to the scientists to deal with the the science.
Well, it's all part of having a good team, right? Like you leave it,
absolutely
leave the stuff for the experts to the experts. I'm gonna pull up while we're chatting a blog that Gaurav wrote for us here, and I'll figure out exactly why, because there was this receptor. I'm not very scientifically inclined, but I will find it. In the meantime, one question that I'm trying to ask very consistently, I think I forgot on one or two of these, whoops, is what is your favorite psychedelic and why, if you have?
So much like when I got involved in the cannabis space, and I made it very clear that I'm not a user, I'm a capitalist. Mm-hmm. I think this is very much a similar approach to the psychedelic side. So, but certainly different psychedelics seem to have greater impact and greater use for different mental illnesses. So you want to treat PTSD, it seems like it's MDMA. If you want to treat depression and suicidality, it's mushrooms and psilocybin, et cetera, et cetera. So what disease do we want to treat today? So that's where it seems like that's where we're heading is what disease do you want to treat? That's the psychedelic that will probably be the best, have the best shot at treating it.
So for people that want to understand what we're talking about, including ourselves, the traditional psychedelic compounds like LSD and psilocybin act primarily upon serotonin, the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor to be exact. And the body of research on these receptors is much deeper than that of the endocannabinoid system. So what I would say is probably going on is just that we know a whole lot more about the underlying mechanisms of how these things are acting in the body and what they're acting on. And so for that reason, we can just understand them and move forward a lot faster.
Whatever you said.
Whatever I just said. I still don't even know what I said. So what you just said earlier, you know, you don't use the substances, you're a capitalist. That's probably going to raise a couple hairs, right? Like, so there seems to be kind of a suits versus the roots. It happened in cannabis, and you know it'll happen in psychedelics. So, what would you say is it's always a hot topic, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts on, like, you know, a capitalist entering the space. Obviously, you know, making money is a priority, but also, you know, improving the world is also a big priority. What would you say, like, you know, to somebody that maybe says like capitalism is bad in psychedelics, and you know it's bad for humanity?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to be investing in a company that where senior management has that sort of attitude. And ultimately, you know, money makes the world go round. And, you know, I believe that capitalism helps everybody. And I think that capitalism here, specifically in this industry, is going to drive considerable research that will ultimately help everybody, because the money will drive the research, which will drive the acceptance, which will drive the availability of the substances to help people. So, you know, I'm an unapologetic capitalist. You know, I believe that.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate the unapologetic of it.
Yeah, capitalism will drive goodwill and drive excellent effects and impact on everybody. So if it wasn't for capitalism, there wouldn't be money for research, and there wouldn't be successes out there. And so
I mean, I can certainly accept that. I'm a bit of a hippy-dippy guy myself. I believe that capitalism can definitely lead to some evils. I don't think Jeff Bezos is in it for us, you know. But like on the other side, I think that conscious capitalism and people with core values at the heart of it, trying to make money but also solve problems, like that's the path forward. Sure.
But even Jeff Bezos, and you know, I understand that people, you know, when a guy's worth almost $1 trillion, it starts to rub people the wrong way. But at the same time, you know, he built a business that is providing unbelievable service. So we're living in our homes, and we need a computer component, and it can show up a few hours later. That's an unbelievable thing. So he's delivering a service that otherwise would never have been available. It enhances our lives as well. So otherwise we wouldn't pay for it. Otherwise he wouldn't be worth $1 trillion. So, you know, again, I think that I wouldn't use Bezos as an example. Sorry, I don't want to give you a hard time on that one, but
totally
but in this
fair.
case,
I'm open here.
You know, in this case, you know, and by and large, I think that that people who do good things create markets, service demand. Those are the people who tend to be most successful in the capital markets. And this is an example here. The recognition that there was an opportunity here to help people drove capital into the industry that is going to enhance the availability of these substances to help people. So.
Yeah, and what a perfect time, right? With COVID and mental health problems just skyrocketing right now. Like, we do need to supercharge this movement.
Yeah, and you know, and I believe that by and large in the world, when there's a need, the solution comes along because of the availability of the need. And you know, we could talk, you know, spiritually about that, and the problems aren't created unless there's a solution to that problem. And you know, I think it's, you know, look at how we're communicating today on Zoom, on Teams, on whatever it is. I can't imagine going through this pandemic without the availability of these tools. People are so productive. You know, we were talking about jumping from one Zoom call to another Zoom call, and we can be completely productive sitting in our homes. We're lucky. I mean, we don't have to be on the front lines, and hats off to those who have to do that, but that we can be productive sitting in our homes, jumping from Zoom call to Zoom call, because the technology, and I would even say the industry, has provided those solutions. So I think we're fortunate. If this pandemic had hit 20 years ago, how many of us would have been able to do what we do from the safety of our homes?
Yeah, I don't think a whole lot of productivity came out of the Spanish flu. That's for sure. But here we are building, innovating, and solving, hopefully.
Look at this space. This space, if you think about psychedelics specifically, so much of the development happened under COVID.
Like that.
And COVID didn't impede it all.
Our business was created right in the thick of the lockdown, like as soon as COVID got crazy.
My involvement in psychedelics as well. It's a funny thing, in the audit world, in the accounting world. So there's all this talk about disclosures, about COVID disclosures. So we get to a psychedelics company, we talk about, okay, where are the COVID disclosures? Like, it's hard to argue that there's real risk to the psychedelic space of COVID when the industry grew up under COVID.
Exactly, a risk of it getting bigger.
You're freezing a little bit, eh? Yeah.
Oh, that'll happen with the Mexico internet. It's not incredible. It's looking fine on my end, so I'm sure we'll pull through on it. So I do this interview in a bit of a 10-10-10 fashion. The first 10 we talk about psychedelics, check. And sure. We just kind of led a little bit into the second 10, which is sustainability. So, we talk about how this movement was really born out of COVID, and it's accelerated it, and this is where the industry is booming right now. Is this a sustainable move based on that logic?
Well, mental illness isn't going anywhere. I think that COVID has brought it under the microscope a little bit, and people are talking about it more. But let's face it, I mean, there was no shortage of mental illness before COVID hit. So, I don't see why not. I think that if when we ever come out of COVID, in Canada, it's going to be a little bit later than some other countries, but when we come out of COVID, I think there will be a recognition that here we have this new potential solution to a problem that goes way back. And my son got involved in this stuff way before COVID hit, and I think that COVID has just brought it to everybody's attention.
Yeah, it's at the forefront because it's a solution to the biggest problem we've seen in generations.
Right. But that problem was there. There's no question.
So the way I always try and ask that question up front is when I say the word sustainability, I kind of prefaced it there, so I broke my own rules. But when I say the word sustainability, what do you think of? Like, what comes to mind?
Well, that word can mean so many different things, right? So you tell me where, what you mean by sustainability, right? Sustainability can mean
because it can mean so many things. So I always like to get the broad, like, what does it mean to you? Because I know what it means to me, but I'd like to know what it means to you.
I mean, I have respect for the environment, but I don't focus, all of my efforts on the environment by any means. You would say that's because I'm a capitalist, but or tend to be politically conservative, but I still respect the environment, and I do believe, as a man of faith, that God gave us this earth, and we have to respect it and take care of it. But usually, I'm not focused on environmental sustainability. I focus from a corporate standpoint on can the sustainability of earnings, as a concept in business. When people are buying a business, they want some comfort that there's sustainable earnings. And because I spend most of my life in the corporate world, there's a big focus on that. You look at a company and you say, are its earnings sustainable, or if there people are projecting getting into earnings, are those earnings going to be sustainable in the future? That's usually where I where I focus when I use that term.
Yeah, in a sense, kind of staying in your lane, right? You're a really good car in that lane. Keep driving.
That's right. Yeah, we
So,
all have to stick. That's part of collaboration, is we all stick to what we do well, and
yeah.
you bring in the right, you get the right people on the bus, and then you're invincible if you have all the right people that you need, and everybody's doing their thing, and everybody's respecting everybody else. That they have the tools to do their thing and work together.
Yeah, invincible until proven otherwise is one of my life mottos. Maybe one day, but not yet. And it's funny because I'm, generally I'm kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. Environmental sustainability to me was a real core focus when I started my cannabis creative agency a couple years ago. It was planting trees for, every job that we did. But as a business that wants to grow and service the environment, and I want to plant a massive forest and be able to walk through it in 20 years and be like, I grew this. I need people like you to keep me on track, making money, making sure the taxes are paid. What's payroll look like? I don't know. So it's like
Yeah.
you need your players in every vertical, right?
Right, and everybody has to respect each other, and where there are differences of opinion, you hash them out, and you come to consensus. Nobody
Big
has to
time.
win all the time. Anybody who thinks they have to win all the time has no place at the boardroom table.
Big time. Yeah. And politics has become a real identity crisis, in my opinion, as of late. Because, like, just because you're a conservative and I might be a little left leaning doesn't mean that we need to hate each other. Like, what's going on with that these days?
Yeah, no, it's a terrible thing that hopefully we're gonna grow out of. It's not going to be easy, and it doesn't pay to try to figure out whose fault it is. We all have to come out of it, and it's not as bad up here in Canada as it is in the U.S. right now.
Mm-hmm.
But and social media doesn't help. But social media is a fact of life. It's not going anywhere, and that's what the future looks like.
Yeah, and it's just a tool. It depends on how you use it, right? Like, 'tis neither
Right, but
good nor bad.
it tends to
The
put
guys
people
that own it.
yeah. And that's pretty odd that they manage, really are out there to control what you can post and what other people see. But the problem is it creates an echo chamber. People surround themselves with people who think the same way as they do, and that it's on both sides. Remember, going back 20 years ago,
they're both escalating in extreme opposites. Yeah.
20 years ago, there was somebody in the New York Times who said, "I can't understand how George W. Bush won. I don't know anybody who voted for him." And that's somebody who's writing for the New York Times.
Promise you somebody did. A couple at least.
Yeah, because Dominion Voting Systems wasn't running the ballots then.
Yeah, we won't get into that. I don't know. I don't know enough about that to have a witty retort, so I'm out. Eject button.
Joking.
No, I love it. I love it. So this kind of brings us. I love that we've naturally segued twice. So, what the third 10 minutes of this podcast, and it's called Incognito. So everyone kind of recognizes that as the browser tab that hides stuff that you don't want to be seeing on your regular tab. But the actual definition of cognito is the philosophical principle that one's existence is demonstrated by the fact that one thinks. And then the second definition is the intellectual process of the self or the ego. So how do you use, the process of being incognito in your day-to-day life and just sort of, knowing who you are?
Well, I think that who I am infuses everything I do. And I think we all do that way. I hope we do. And we're good people, and we want to help the world, and we want to help our clients, and we want to help the people we're working with, and we shouldn't forget who we are just because we're on a Zoom call or in the boardroom or on Bay Street or Wall Street. So I would say that's how, that's how it impacts my life. I live by that sort of a creed, that, loyalty to my clients, loyalty to my family, loyalty to my business, my business colleagues, and loyalty to my common man. I mean, I think that's, probably a lot deeper than I usually talk, but if you're asking me, that's probably what I would say is, we have a duty to each other. But I believe, we started off this discussion by talking about capitalism, and I believe that capitalism feeds that by and large. Adam
Ability
Smith
for people to know themselves, you mean?
But the natural way that when people act out of self-interest, they're actually helping people. The invisible hand that Adam Smith wrote of. People, the opportunity, as long as we're in an environment of equal opportunity, the fact that people have that opportunity through their own efforts to advance themselves. But you're not going to advance yourself if all you're doing is, screwing other people, because eventually nobody's going to want to do business with you. You're going to be left, alone, without being able to do anything. So I think we build reputations based on the good that we do and the hard work we do, and ultimately it pays back. So I believe that that my life is sort of a testament to that. I've been working hard at what I do for almost 40 years since I graduated university. It's hard to believe, and I think that plus the help of you'll forgive me, but I'll say the help of God and the help of my family, and opportunities arise. Whether it was in cannabis or in psychedelics or in sports, opportunities arise. And I think that's a function of the fact that I've worked hard in my life, and put the interests of my clients and my colleagues front and center, and it's paid off.
Yeah. So really doing what you want, but also being of service to those that you love, right?
Exactly. Because if you're not of service, if you're only looking out for yourself, who's going to want to do business with you?
Not me.
That's right.
Tell you what. And that's something that I've noticed really in the psychedelic space specifically. I was a wedding photographer for 5 years, and then I was a cannabis entrepreneur for 3 years, and it's been about a year in the psychedelic space. And what I've experienced is this great degree of removed ego. Everyone's kind of here for the team, here for the collective vision. It seems like people are really, working on this for that greater degree of service, not to the, just themselves, but also to the world. And also to what you said is the non-altruistic mixed with the altruistic is it might be because they dealt with depression or anxiety or PTSD, had this fixed, and then it's let me go make a business and help the world, right? And that, to me, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and you talk about ego, and ego, as far as I'm concerned, ego is the biggest enemy of the corporate world, right?
Big time.
You can't collaborate if you have ego. Nobody wants to work for you if you have ego. Nobody wants to work with you. It ultimately, people who have big egos and are bullies, everybody runs from them. So, I think there's a big difference between, and I'm big on the distinction between ego and self-confidence. Mm-hmm. We all need self-confidence, or else we can't get out of bed in the morning, right? We can't do anything in business or in life. But there's a big difference. You have to have self-confidence. You can't have ego.
You need the gusto.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Have you noticed in the psychedelic space, it's been about a year, and you've worked, you said 4 decades you've been working at what you've been doing, right? Have you noticed a difference in the composition of, players or characters in this space versus others?
Well, the natural one to compare it to is cannabis, right? And I find that the quality of management in the psychedelic space to be considerably higher, especially in the small to mid-size psychedelics companies compared to the cannabis companies. And some of the cannabis guys, may take offense that I say this, but listen, I speak my mind, and you're talking to me. You want to hear what I think, so. There's
the whole point of this podcast.
Yeah. So I find, because of the pharma side of psychedelics that we were talking about earlier, as opposed to the rec side of the cannabis space, there's a much higher level of sophistication. There's pharma guys. There's guys who are science. There's more. It's much more science based. So you get a much more sophisticated C-suite in the psychedelic space for similar sized companies than you would in the cannabis space. The classic in cannabis is, you got the CEO, and he acknowledges that he's been growing for 20 years, but it's only been legal for 2, like how exactly is that working, right?
Well, MMPR has been around for almost 2 decades. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or MMAR.
except they're entirely focused on the rec space and not the medical space.
Completely different beast, right? And that's why I'm always kind of, I have a good laugh when people are like, I don't know, I got burned in cannabis and I don't know about this one. It's like, look into do a little due diligence, look into the ramifications of this long term, and I don't think it's even comparable.
No, it's a very, very, people naturally associate the two, but it's a very, very different space. And I think that that's why I think that the space is developing at a much quicker pace than cannabis did.
So,
and we'll see, and the legislation side is really interesting. What's been going on in the States just out of nowhere, right?
Yeah. Oregon went full send the other day. It was just like, game on, let's go. Yeah.
And even in Canada, there've been twice Theracell has received releases from the government, right? And just twice in the last few months. So there's stuff happening there.
Well, and the big one to me was that Theracell recently got an exemption for somebody that wasn't end of life. Right. And then it's like, okay, now that you opened that Pandora's box, what else? Right.
The first one was end of life, which was natural, and then that migrated, and so it's. I think we're going to see. It's going to be very, very quick, and compare that to how long it took to legalize cannabis in this country, and Canada, and yet Canada was the first. So I think things are going to move much, much quicker, and part of it is going to be because of the sophistication of the C-suite, and some of the successes in the on the cannabis legislation, can't hurt. The fact that it didn't migrate to the kids and stuff like that. There hasn't been an outbreak. It's
actually
not,
teen usage dropped when legalization happened. It's like, oh man, my parents are smoking weed. It's not cool anymore. A rapid fire question.
It's not reefer madness, right?
No, it's reefer gladness now. No reefer sadness. So we look at the cannabis market, and this is we're out of the 10 minutes, we're done. But when you look at the cannabis market, there's many billion-dollar valuation companies trading public. There's a huge market internationally. And you look at the psychedelic market, there's a lot of private companies, a lot of people that nobody's even heard about, but they got a deck and a team, and they're doing the research. On the public markets, you've got Compass, they're $1 billion. MindMed, I think they're approaching $1 billion. They're like 880 or something last time I checked. If you look at the overall market cap of cannabis and the overall market cap of psychedelics, when do you think psychedelics catches up?
I'm not going to predict that.
Too vague, eh?
And my crystal ball isn't working.
That's fair. Mine never works, so it's entirely reasonable.
you know, I think that there will continue to be, you know, at a similar pace to what we've been seeing. There will continue to be very, very interesting developments. We'll have more companies going public. This latest, you know, this Zeifman IPO a couple weeks ago, and the latest deal that came out that Peter Thiel is involved in is interesting. And you know, there's a bunch of deals happening, and at a pace that we haven't seen, you know, in the cannabis space in a long time. So it's interesting stuff, and then we'll start to see more and more developments, you know, on the legislative side. That's the other shoe that will drop soon, and the science will continue to prove itself out. So I think it's going to be a very interesting space to watch.
It's funny because it seems like almost like the science and the business are actually driving the legislation at this point. Like, come on, guys, catch up. Let's go. We proved it. You know.
Well, but that's natural because the politicians are always slow to act.
Yeah, that's the way she goes.
Yeah. They act when they're forced to.
Well, we're gonna make them. That's for sure. So this is coming up to the end, but I would love to invite you to share any closing thoughts or let people know where they can find you and, you know, learn more about your work and learn about what you do.
So closing thoughts, I want to compliment you guys on what you're doing. I mean, I think it's great that the industry is developing its own experts out there. And, you know, I like what you guys are doing. That I have an investment investment fund background as well on the audit side. So I like, you know, what Conscious Fund is doing, and, you know, the development of funds in the psychedelic space is interesting as well. So, you know, you guys should keep up the good work. I think it's crucial to enhancing information out there about the space. And when that information comes from an objective, knowledgeable source, I think it helps everybody. You know, for us, you know, connect with me on LinkedIn, check out our website, Zeifmans.ca. And anybody who's interested, drop me a line. Patrick, it's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk. And look forward to the next time.